A new adult English language learner booked a trial English lesson with me. We'll call her Lola. Now, this is not her real name. Anyway, she described her English level as intermediate. Her message read, "I think my current level is around B1. She wanted grammar, speaking, sentence structure, tenses, fluency, and confidence. But after the initial conversation and needs assessment, I realized that this student's starting point required that we focus on A2 level activities in our first few lessons." Hi, I'm Marie Richards, an experienced online English teacher. For over 10 years, I've helped English learners worldwide improve their English for work, for study, and for their everyday lives. How did I do that? Through over 14,000 online lessons. Now I'm sharing with other global online English teachers practical strategies, student success stories, and the habits that help English learners reach their variety of goals. So subscribe, click the notification bell, and share with your friends. So back to my student Lola. So how could a learner write a polished intermediate level introduction and still need alphabet practice? This happens more often than teachers think. And that is exactly why we cannot build a course based only on the student's first introductory message. So the central question of this video is, how can an online English teacher honor what an English learner says they need, while also digging deeper to see how they actually use English in real life? So, online English as second language teachers, I will share with you how I discovered the best starting point for my student. A learner's written introduction tells us something important. It shows us how they want to present themselves. It may show us what skills they believe they need, but it's the live performance that shows me where the teaching curriculum needs to begin, because it shows what the student can do independently, in real time, under pressure. That is why the first lesson needs to include a revealing needs assessment. Not just what do you want to improve, but questions that help you understand the student's why behind the answer. Why do they want to improve their English? For example, some of these questions work for me. Why is this important to you now? Do you have a deadline or a specific situation or event coming up? Where do you need to use English most? What happens when English is difficult for you? What do you do? What would become easier in your life if your English improved? As an English language teacher, you're listening for a specific timeline, urgency of upcoming events, motivation, or their real life context. Think of it this way. Students often tell us their symptoms. They may say, "Oh, I need better grammar. I need pronunciation. I need to speak more fluently. I need IELTS." These answers are useful, but they're usually the surface level description of the problem. Your role as the English language teacher is to gently uncover the bigger problem the learner is trying to solve. For example, an adult professional might say, "I need to improve my pronunciation," and maybe they do. But if we build the entire course around pronunciation drills, intonation practice, and isolated correction, the learner may eventually lose motivation or even stop coming to the lessons. Why? Because they may not really be looking only for pronunciation practice. They may be trying to feel more respected in their business meetings. They may want to stop repeating themselves 3 times or more before someone understands what they're saying. They may want to speak during a presentation without feeling embarrassed. They may want colleagues to notice their expertise instead of focusing on their accent. In other words, they're not only trying to improve their English, They're trying to regain their professional confidence and dignity. And that deeper motivation is often social in nature. It's emotional. It's professional. So when a student says to me, I need pronunciation help, I don't ignore that request. I teach pronunciation, but I do so within their real life context or other world events. So before you build the curriculum, ask, when do you feel your pronunciation is most difficult for you? Who do you need to speak with? What happens in those conversations? What would you like to be able to do more confidently? The answer may completely change your lesson design. Instead of spending the whole course repeating individual sounds, you might build practice around role plays involving work meetings, client conversations on different topics, a job interview, a presentation, or a difficult phone call. Within that context, you can help the student to notice pronunciation challenges and make targeted changes using English prosody, which includes word stress, sentence stress, rhythm, linking words together, reductions of certain words, intonation, and pausing, so that their speech sounds clearer, more natural, and better matched to their communicative purpose. For example, rather than practicing stress in isolation, let the student learn how shifting stress changes meaning in a meeting. For example, they could say, I said Tuesday, not Thursday. Or they could say, I said Tuesday, not Thursday. What part of prosody do you most want to communicate to your specific student? Clarity, listener effort, or meaning? So my student Lola's original statement was, I want to learn English to make friends. After the needs assessment and the first few lessons, I uncovered her strong motivators were to meet new people, continue a natural conversation, express her personality in conversation, form closer friendships, maintain a conversation with a possible romantic partner, feel less dependent on others during social situations. So Lola had important strengths. She understood my questions and she responded with relevant ideas. She had some useful vocabulary, but her foundational language, English sentence patterns, were not well developed. This made it difficult for me to understand her thoughts. After the first lesson, I assessed her language skills as A2 level, moving maybe towards a B1. Her answers often relied on short patterns such as, I draw animals. That sentence is correct, but she had difficulty expanding it. For example, I draw animals because I enjoy painting nature. She mixed present and past forms in the verb tenses. She sometimes missed the third person's S on the end of the verb. She used very few connectors, and forming questions was particularly difficult for her. So I had two responsibilities. I needed to respect the goals Lola had given me, but I also needed to begin where her live performance showed me that she needed help most. One of my first solutions was to make English word order visible and movable. Each word or phrase appeared on a separate square. So Lola could move the words that appeared on the digital squares, and this allowed me to use the technique of total physical response, or TPR. So she moved the blocks that contained the words she, practices, yoga, at college every Tuesday. She arranged the pieces until the sentence became clear. She practices yoga at college every Tuesday. The sentence was no longer an invisible grammar explanation. Because of the TPR, she could touch each part with her cursor. She could see the sentence structure. She could move the time phrase around. She could replace the subject. She could change the verb. She could watch what happened to the sentence when one piece or block was changed. Now, for the question formation, we used another visible pattern. She could see how the words indicating manner, place, and time, the question words, moved to the beginning of the text when we had to form a question. So, playing with the words where, do, you, work, Lola was able to see how we formed the correct question, where do you work? And that was different than her original question, where you work. Instead of hearing only that her sentence was wrong, Lola could see which piece was missing and which piece did not belong. The activity progressed in stages. First, I demonstrated the sentence using the blocks or squares. Then Lola moved the squares. Next, she read the completed sentence aloud. After that, I removed one square and asked her to supply the missing word. Finally, the entire model disappeared and Lola recreated a similar sentence about her life using the pattern we had just practiced. So the total physical response or TPR activity helped her to remember. The activity helped her to build individual sentences. I then gave her ChatGPT prompts to help her practice her own sentences as part of her homework. But isolated sentences were not the final goal. The next bridge was seeing sentences connected in a story. We took the sentences and vocabulary she had learned during class and placed them into visual stories using the Gemini storybook. So I used AI and technology for helping her with her homework assignments where it made sense. For example, we started by creating a story in the present tense only. First, Ilara walks into a small village. The air feels very warm on her skin. She sees a busy street with many people. Then I generated that same story in the past tense so she could see the clear differences. So to summarize her learning journey, first we had to practice the alphabet. Then we learned the order of words in a sentence. Then Lola built her first sentence with word squares, following the order she had learned. Then she saw how sentences are put inside a meaningful story. Next, she retold her story with pictures. Finally, she used the same structure to discuss something that had actually happened in her life. So, let's move from stories to social conversation. At first, the work appeared to be mainly about alphabet knowledge, word order, and verb tenses, but the subjects Lola repeatedly chose began revealing a deeper purpose. Her subjects were yoga, hiking, fashion, parties, and meeting people. Sentence structure was not the final destination. It was a bridge between the ideas Lola already had and the social connections she wanted to make. But crossing that bridge required another skill. A conversation is created by two people, one turn at a time. Many conversational English materials offer useful questions by topic. For example, questions for the gym, questions for lunch, questions for hiking, questions for the park. Now, these questions can certainly help a learner start a conversation, but they don't always teach the English learner, what to do after an unexpected answer. Without that skill, a conversation can begin to sound like an interview. Have you hiked this trail before? Do you live near here? Do you hike often? What are you doing tomorrow? Each question may be grammatically correct, but they're not connected. They don't stimulate a conversation. The key idea is simple. Your next response should connect to something the other person just said. For Lola, I turned this into a simple routine. Ask about the shared setting, listen for one detail, link to that detail with your next comment, then share something related. Imagine Lola is hiking. She could start with what they were both doing. For example, she could say, "Have you hiked this trail before?" The other person could say, "Yes, I came here last winter with my sister." Lola now has two possible conversation threads, last winter and my sister. Instead of changing the subject, she follows on with, "Last winter? I've only seen this trail in summer. What was it like then?" That short response shows she was listening. Her comment shares a little bit about her own experience, and her follow-up gives the other person an easy way to continue the conversation. This pattern works in many settings. At the gym, you could say, "Have you tried this class before?" And the person might reply, "No, I usually do Pilates." So Lola could say, "Pilates? Interesting. What do you like about Pilates?" The next question depends on the answer. That is why memorizing 20 conversation questions is not enough. English learners need to listen, notice one detail in what someone just said, and use that detail to build their next question. And questions alone are not enough either. If Lola only asks questions, the other person may feel interviewed. So she adds one short reaction or one related personal detail. "Oh, that's interesting." Or, "I have only tried yoga. I've been thinking about visiting that cafe. I usually come here on Saturdays." Then she brings the conversation back to the other person by asking a follow-up question. This makes the exchange feel more balanced. Of course, there's no single correct way to have a conversation, but Lola also learns to notice the other person's signals. A detailed answer, a smile, or a question in return may mean the person wants to continue. A short answer may mean it's time to end the conversation politely. The goal is not to make every conversation last longer. The goal is to notice when someone opens a conversational door and know when to step through it. Lola began using this routine during her weekend activities. She said it helped her move past the first question instead of freezing or running out of things to say. First, Lola learned to organize her own language. Then she learned to let another person's language guide her next response. So that is the shift from practicing English to taking part in real social conversations. Now, leave your answer in the comments below as to how you help your English language students improve their conversation skills. We can learn from each other. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe for more of these tips from the other videos in the series.